Hi there, ho there, hey there. This is Jim the Keys Bartender. Welcome to another episode of the Keys Bartender. I am here by my lonesome today, but if you are interested in contacting me, let me check that number. It's 407 If you happen to be listening live, but since I didn't pre-announce it, you'd have to trip across it and you'd see the that we're streaming live, but that's 407-392-4563, and you can also chat with us on Spreaker. If you go to the Spreaker app, you'll be able to chat with us. The royal we, us, not that I'm any special, but the title of this episode is Why, and I knew I'll go through a little later. I'll do a little poem, maybe. I'm in Key Largo, Keys Bartender. I still get, very interesting, I get I have a Twitter account, Facebook account, and an Instagram account. And on the Instagram account, every so often, I'll get a message from someone on Facebook or some on Instagram, not so much on Twitter, but they'll start asking hi, start with the hi, and I just realized, I should know now when someone says hi, it's a fishing expedition, it's a catfishing expedition. But you know me, if you've listened to any episodes, you know me, Jim, that I'm going to assume that, hey, maybe this is someone who listens to the podcast and they're sending me a message. And it's usually a young woman, attractive young woman, and she'll ask me, where do I live? What do I do? How old am I? And then usually they come down to, I'm having problems making my bills and all that stuff. I guess, 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30, it's a good gimmick for them, a good situation that they're doing is just going hitting as many people as possible and then asking them for money. And it's they're getting better with their bogus accounts because some of them have extra pictures on it. It's just not 2 pictures. And if you go to the info, I guess guys are real eager. They don't even go and check when they see the account. It'll say male on it, and it's a picture of a woman, and they'll have 2 different names, and they'll be here in the United States, and they'll have an anglicized name, and they will probably phrase their question as, how many years do you have? And that sounds like a translation application that they're using, that instead of saying, how old are you? Or things like that. But I've gotten that, and I don't know what my point was on that one, but that was very interesting. But I do use my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram account. But right now I'm in the Key Largo. It is in the mid 80s. It's a little humid out there. It's not too hot. I mean, after a long hot summer, I can't imagine why anybody would be tremendously put out by the heat. We are on the 25th, I think it's 25th named storm, Delta, but not like Delta Burke, the Greek letter Delta. So if we hit Epsilon, which is right, I think Epsilon's right after, I should remember that, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, Zeta, Eta, Theta. Oh my God, if we ever get to Theta, Storm Theta, then we're fucked. We're thoroughly fucked. But I guess not New Orleans, Louisiana, the western Louisiana and the Lake Charles area and Texas are in for it, and they've had several. And my heart goes out to you guys. But that's the way that, I hate to say, people get all pissed off. That's a new normal for the weather, and it seems like certain people have accepted that the way it is. Yeah, you can't argue with the weather, but you can debate the causes of the increased activity, which many people believe to be global warming. And I am one of them because I believe a predominant amount of science, and the opposition believes people that, if you think of it logically, the scientists that are invested in ensuring that it has nothing to do with human activity, carbon output, people that that are funded by carbon-heavy industries, not so much coal anymore, but oil and gas, will debate that this is going to happen no matter what, and there's nothing we do about it. And if you try to curtail that, the amount of carbon we put in the air, or try to restrict the amount of fossil fuels, you're going to be harming our lifestyle. And on the opposition, for people that believe in it, they believe that the being a harbinger of new technologies, clean energy, renewable fuels, will create a new surge in growth and activity. And my belief is that there's some of the companies is going to become, some of the companies, I think it's Mobil and Exxon, they're converting over to renewables. And once they get heavily on renewables, you'll start seeing them less funding to people against carbon and more on the other side, because they still want to, obviously they want to make money in all sectors. And that's, I wouldn't call it unethical or immoral, because morally a company or corporation is supposed to make money for its investors. So what they see is, we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do, is increase the earning opportunities for our investors. And so that would be funding science, funding the scientists and the science that would go against that, with more and more people, and especially the states that are heavy in it. If you're a state or a country that has a lot of fossil fuels, and that's your main, one of your main income sources, you'll more likely take that in. But I believe we're seeing the repercussions of that kind of mindset that you do it. And it's very hard to change someone's mind when they do it. So that's where this episode is called Why, and we'll call this I don't know, just why. And we're in just, gosh, how far away are we from the election? A little under 4 weeks from election day, and people are actively voting now, and whether absentee or early voting, in about a week and a half here in Florida, the October 19th until the Monday, I think actually maybe the Sunday preceding the election. So it'll be approximately 2 weeks of early voting, and then we'll have election day. I have questions. First, why are we denying the seriousness of COVID-19? What is I understand it hampers business activity and social activity and our free movement, but just think of what happened in the past week. In the White House, Trump and his wife become infected, as well as, up to this date, I think the number is above 30, and there's a whole slew of countries where we have more infections, COVID-19 infections, than with just the people in the White House, than whole countries like New Zealand and South Korea and all that stuff. What happened is Donald gets taken to Walter Reed, and I know it pisses off some of you that I call him that, but I really don't believe that he's fit to be president of the United States. He's been showing that more and more recently, and I've given up on why people would support this guy. I don't really understand it. But if you do follow him closely, then you do see what happens, and you would see that last week that he was taking to Walter Reed Hospital by helicopter, Marine One. And if is that serious? That's pretty serious as President of the United States. And if you believe that COVID-19 is serious, they could have very easily drove there, but they took a helicopter there. Why they have to rush there if it's not a serious illness? He right away they restrict all the information coming out of Walter Reed. He's put on an experimental drug, a cocktail of antivirals that may or may not work now because it's not over yet. We're not sure, and there's some speculation that the steroids he's on has led to his bipolar tweeting yesterday, which would have been on Wednesday. He's put on that antiviral. He has a whole medical team looking after him. So Walter Reed Hospital is the main military hospital in the United States. Walter Reed was a military officer, and he oversaw the U.S. Army's, and this is I'm reaching in the back of my head, I didn't do any research on it, the fight against malaria by the U.S. Army, because it was one of those tropical things happening, especially in the more subtropical parts of our country and different parts of the world where Americans stationed. So Walter Reed Hospital has and most of the doctors in the medical arm and services are reservists, and they're great doctors. They're wonderful doctors. So Trump had been looked at by a whole team of people. So think about that. If you got sick, do you believe, unless you're a billionaire, and we're not even sure if he's a billionaire anymore, that you would get the same level or a same level of care and attention and access as much as Trump did, and all the things, and he's kind of directing them to do all this stuff. And then we found out a little later now, you know this by hearing the doctors, that they're being very closed-mouthed about his health when they did their little news conference, and he brought out the 6 other doctors standing behind him, and it looked like a movie set. Like it sounded like he was told, it says, I want you to go out and I want some doctors behind you. So there's more than one doctor, and there'll be support. And they were kind of evasive on whether he was on oxygen or not. We find out later he was on oxygen twice. And now we see that he was sick, and it's pretty much, we do understand that it was most likely, and they haven't admitted it yet, that it was the Saturday nominating party of Amy Barrett, that a bunch of people got together on the White House lawn and without mask. Most of them, I'd say. I saw a couple other people, and I saw some very much senior people, meaning senior in years. There was a man who looked like he had to be in his mid-80s sitting in one of the rows, and he's sitting there. Just remember that was one of those common events, and there were other events. There was a medal ceremony in the White House too, and there's more people get it. But a lot of people at that gathering were the ones that became suddenly ill. And then there's a question of when was the last one of the last secrets that they will not answer any of the representatives in the White House was, when did Trump last test negative, which is very important, so we can see what the progress of is right now. So he was in Walter Reed. We see him. He goes out in his armored SUV with Secret Service and exposes them, even though they're in They're in an enclosed environment. It's all totally enclosed, and there's no ventilation or anything like that to protect the occupants inside from any type of gas attack or anything like that. So all that stuff is just kind of ruminating around the inside of the SUV. So the Secret Service detail that's driving them around is exposed to it. Now they got to be quarantined. And then he decides in a day or two that he wants to go back to the White House. And he makes a big kind of thing about it. Now, who the hell does that? Just think of the imagery. And we'll get into later about, the problems why they bring up socialism and how this imperial presidency they're trying to establish. So he shows up in Marine One, coming back, landing on the lawn, runs up the steps with the help of, I'm assuming he never did that before. You didn't see him do it before, with the help of steroids. And we all know steroids are a performance-enhancing drug. And even after that, you see him sucking air really good when he gets up to the top and he takes his mask off. And then he has the White House photographer come up and follow him. And he does a bunch of videos after that. And he's exposing his staff. He's still infected. Exposing his staff to its infection. And right now, as of yesterday, he's in the Oval Office. And, a lot of the people that work in the West Wing are now, having their lunches outside and things like that. Because the weather's, nice out there, and, it's just, but there's a reason why they're eating outside is because the occupant of the White House is using the offices, and he decides that, and he's probably not wearing a mask because he didn't wear a mask when he got home in front of everyone, and he goes off and says, live your life out of no fear for COVID-19. How in the hell are you not supposed to live your life in fear of COVID-19 if you just saw supposedly the most powerful man in the world? I dispute that because he does not have the intellectual properties to be the most powerful man in the world. It's the most dangerous, maybe one of the most dangerous men in the world or people in the world. He's not the most powerful because he has given over, I believe, our defense over to our enemies. And so here we are. We're dealing with that. And last night we had the vice presidential debate. And after the first presidential debate, and it remains to be seen, it seems like they may go with a virtual debate on the 15th of this month from Miami, that we get a little more of the same. We get evasion. Okay. The one thing that the Vice President Biden and Senator Harris's campaign did not address was the packing of the Supreme Court. They did not address that question. They avoided that question. I'll agree with that. But almost every other question to the Vice President, who the guy that occupies the Vice President office right now, Michael Pence, was avoided. Think about it. When they ask, how do you believe your performance was with 213,000 or 211,000 people dead? He did not address that. He went on and talked about American people. And he threw back in the people that deny science, threw back in Kamala Harris's face, Senator Harris's face, that doesn't have a right to her, she has a right to her own opinion, but she has a right to her own facts. Now, that's something we used to use. They just appropriated that because we know that science isn't one of those things. Because the vice president was in charge of the COVID-19 Corona Task Force, and he did not answer a direct question about why did we do so poorly in the United States with a death rate that was close to 20 times higher than China. And why did the administration eschew the use of mask, which is a simple thing. It's not draconian. It's not draconian. Wearing a mask is not draconian. It's not an insult to you or anything like that. There, right now, there's protests by in New York by Hasidic Jews concerning the restrictions on gatherings in religious groups, and a lot of them weren't wearing masks. But we know conservative religious groups are pretty much anti-science, so we understand their idea that they don't really believe that the works of man can overdo the works of God. But they're right now they're protesting and almost rioting in New York concerning the restrictions put on by the governor and de Blasio in New York City. And this is as we speak, and they do it at night and all that stuff. So Pence, being a man of faith, being in charge of the Corona Task Force, didn't say anything about masks, did not promote use of masks when almost every other first world country promoted the use of masks. Every mainstream scientist did, and doctor. And it's only the outliers, the people that the demon sex doctor, non-scientific people that aren't epidemiologists that are doing it, and why the president and his family and supporters at the first debate, after being urged by the Cleveland Clinic to wear a mask, chose not to wear a mask. And if Trump knew that he was infected at the time of the debate, and the family knew that, then it goes to almost like negligent or intent to do harm. So it's actually criminal what's going on right now. So let's get to the debate. When one of the things was brought up right away was the pre-existing condition. Now, since 2015 or 2016, Trump has said that he pretty much wants to get rid of everything that Obama created, and the American Care Act, the one that guarantees protection against pre-existing conditions, and COVID-19 can be seen as a pre-existing condition. They want to get rid of, and he signed a toothless document protecting pre-existing conditions. But that does not. There's no penalties. There's no restrictions. There's no teeth in the pre-existing, protecting pre-existing conditions. Just signing executive order does not do that unless you have a law. And just like the law, matter of fact, that healthcare providers have to provide something like 80% of healthcare value versus in the total cost of the premium that you pay, whatever you pay. And if they don't, they have to refund a certain amount of money to you, the money that wasn't used for healthcare instead of for administration and other things. So why all this rush? Because the pre-existing condition thing was the strongest thing in that Affordable Care Act. It was the strongest and the most positive thing. Now, the public option is another thing that Vice President Biden's proposing, that there be a public option. And public option means that you would pay into a public pool. Why would that be? I don't get that. A public option just means you, instead of paying a healthcare company, you're paying a pooled source for providing rationing of healthcare. You get rationed healthcare anyway from your HMOs. And remember, if you got any premium back from them, that was due to the Affordable Care Act. And prior to the Affordable Care Act, the premiums were skyrocketing. Were skyrocketing. So now, whenever they talk about taxing and a public choice for healthcare, they mention the use of socialism. And being in South Florida, we have a large Cuban American community, and Fidel Castro, a communist, not a socialist. You may call it socialist principles or things like that, but it's pretty much it became a dictatorship or cult of personality down there because it was run by the same family. It was handpicked because it wasn't a republic. It wasn't a democracy. It wasn't a democracy before then. Trujillo, there wasn't universal suffrage in Cuba. Not everyone got a right to choose who the president of Cuba was. Things like that. That's why they were overthrown. And they were overthrown by an extremist, Fidel Castro. And eventually his brother took over too. And now there's someone that picked by Fidel Castro. So they always point to, when they mention socialism, they point to Cuba. Cuba this, Cuba that, Cuba that. But if you truly want to talk about socialism in the model that would be employed here, and they're not talking about that. Neither Harris nor Biden are of the socialist ilk. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. They're probably more of the mainstream, moderate, in the style of Clinton and most Democrats. They believe that there is room for public and private. And so if you wanted to really truly compare healthcare, you got to look at places like Finland, Iceland, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway. Those places. And there's a whole bunch of other ones. Because we're always talking about this, how, do you want to be social? Your choice between democracy and communism. Well, no one's promoting the eradication of private property. That hasn't come about. They're just talking about a public option when it comes to health care. And they're mentioning something about education and affordable wages, right? And protecting our safety nets, such as Social Security, Medicare, things like that. So if you're combating that, your democracy, your Make America Great crew, look at this. Just hold on to some. I know you have a problem with these facts, but measured in scores by other countries, America ranks 38 or 27th in the world in healthcare. In one particular demographic, and that's infant mortality or statistic, we are 33 out of 36. Okay, so the three countries we're ahead of are Mexico, Chile, and Turkey. And then we get a bunch of those countries in front of us. We have Japan, Korea, the Netherlands, Norway. Iceland's right at the, when I say top, the lowest infant mortality. It's it's less than, it may be 1/10 ours. Yes, maybe 1/8, 1/10 of America's. So there's 33 countries in front of us. In math, let's say just in math, education, we're 38th. Now this isn't healthcare, but it does play a part in what I'm talking about. We're 38th in the world. 38th. There's 37 countries in front. We're a big country. And our mascot. So, what part of that is making America great? Where we're dropping down and dropping down. And we're dropping down in all sorts of metrics. In power, perceived power. A lot of countries don't view us as strong as before. Our alliance system is in decimate. Our alliance system was the envy of the world. Not since Rome, the Republic of Rome, has an alliance system been seen. And I think the U.S. alliance system, it was a global alliance system. We had the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that encompassed most of the countries of Europe. Western Europe now started incorporating the former Soviet alliance countries, so former Warsaw Pact countries. We have Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. We have Poland, the eastern part of Germany. You have Slovakia. I mean, all these countries are inside the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And then we have the Organization of American States. And then we also have SEATO, SEATO, which is Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Japan, Thailand, Australia. And then we've been growing a little closer to India too. These alliance systems that we had multiplied the strength of the United States, where even with a huge amount of spending, and I understand that they're talking about that NATO they're not pulling their weight and all that stuff. It's the alliance, not necessarily the raw power behind it. It's alliance in NATO combined. We have, and that includes Canada. You combined, that's upwards of 700 million, a population of 700 million people. And then you have our alliance system outweighs the rest of the world in raw military power, in Navy and Air Forces and things like that. Now, China is spending a significant amount more than before, and Russia is trying to regain it back. But even if China and Russia were able to join together, and they would not be able to outmatch the treaty organizations that the U.S. had. Now, I said had because I believe that if this president is reelected, we will be definitely withdrawn from NATO, and it will be a former shadow of itself. And I believe Europe is providing more in their national defense because they believe right now that United States is not considered their staunch ally as before. And same thing goes for Southeast Asia. Japan, South Korea, when I mention that, I mean South Korea, they are now militarily on par, I'd have to say, or probably exceed North Korea. And if they really wanted to become nuclearized, they have the technological ability to do it quickly and probably exceed the North Koreans. But really, I'm not kidding. And just remember the friendships that the president established with dictators, Putin, Kim Jong-un, Erdogan of Turkey, the guy in Hungary, they aren't going to protect us. Remember, Putin. Remember the stories from this summer. The Russians paid Russian secret services paid bounties to the Taliban for killing coalition troops, and that mainly is American troops. So what exactly are we talking? So if we're going to talk about socialism, let's compare apples to apples and talk about Finland, Norway, Netherlands, Iceland, and stuff like that. And if you want to talk about our power, think of the alliance that helped bring down the Soviet Union. It was a NATO alliance that helped do it and keep them in check. So let's get on the debate last night. The very most, I think, the besides Pence avoiding anything remotely considered as an answer to a direct question, when he was asked directly about Amy Barrett being nominated to the Supreme Court, and ignoring the president's, where it's funny that Harris County School, he said Pence said that there was numerous times where justices have been nominated and put on the Supreme Court in the last year of her presidency. But this is the last 3 weeks of the presidency, because the election happens on November 3rd, and we don't have to go that far back, but Harris did go back to 1865 when Abraham Lincoln decided not to try to push through his nominee onto the Supreme Court, decided to wait out the election to see what the results were and let the people, American people, decide who would be the next sitting justice for a lifetime appointment. So she went back that far, but she didn't have to go that far back because we all recall what happened with Merrick Garland. Yes, and Obama was the lame duck, but it was his last year. It wasn't in the election cycle yet. It wasn't that late in the election cycle. And considering the way the polls are, and I know you don't understand, we are 38th in the world in math scores, so polls don't really matter to you. And they do understand that the reason they're against absentee ballots is that it heavily favors Democratic candidates, that they're trying to push the Supreme Court and states to restrict absentee ballots and restrict access. They've been restricting access to voters. You know, when you have to wait 7 hours in a line on election day, you're not putting enough resources into voting, or you're not giving people enough time to vote if someone has to wait 7 hours. Now here in Florida, I did mention on October 15th we're going to start voting. I'm going to vote. I'm even going to attempt to volunteer to work on election day, so I can be there in case any assholes show up. I just want to make sure that the election is fair, at least in my neck of the woods. I want to keep my side of the street clean. And my suggestion for anybody, if you really want to participate in the election, volunteer for a local campaign. All you have to do is call up one of your local politicians, or go to your election, director of elections in your county or city. Call their office, ask if you're accepting volunteers. There's poll watchers. News organizations have poll watchers. They're there. When I was 17 years old, I was a poll watcher. And what I did is I collected the results when they were counting them and sending them to regional collection areas when they were opening up the voting booths. Now it's a little different, but back then it was a little low tech. And so you can do those things. And I'd like to send one special. I have a friend, Ted. I want to make sure that Ted, while you're going up to New Jersey, I send my condolences to you and your family for the loss of your father. And Ted's been a listener for a long time, and we do appreciate that. And wish you a safe journey. Finally, before I sign off, I'm going to send another dedication to the fly that landed on Pence's head at around 10:16, I think last night, Wednesday night. I'm watching the debate after work at the Catch, and there's Pence and Senator Harris, and I think Pence was in the middle of talking, and all of a sudden, a fly comes down. It's his head. Now, it could have been a Democratic plant or a Tifa fly. I don't know. There was a lot of memes after that. I myself posted a page on Facebook called Mike Pence Fly. And I also got one called Mike Pence's Fly. But I don't think it's his fly. I don't think the fly actually belonged to Mike Pence. And the fly appeared at least 2 minutes, so it adhered to the 2-minute rule, much more than Pence did. But when I say it adhered, I thought in the beginning it got caught in the hairspray, Michael's. And we all know what flies are attracted to. I don't even have to say it. We know what flies. Like a fly, happy as a fly on what? Shit? I did say it. Well, I guess I failed on that one. And that fly was incredible. That just, if anybody asks for, like, oh, if there's only can be some sign from God to show me if this guy is full of shit, a fly landed on his head and sat there, still, perfectly still. Didn't even walk around and mope around and stuff like that, and just sat there on his head. I mean, it would have been great if he stayed there the rest of the debate, and then someone had to walk over and pick it out. But that fly took off at the end. I guess he couldn't stand it too much longer. I guess we know how they feel. So for now, I'm going to be signing off. This is episode 332. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. I have some listeners, well, a listener or listeners from Washington, D.C. I imagine, I hope you're not the... well, I can't imagine me having angry listeners, meaning you can get pissed off at me, but if you're not of the same outlook, if you're a science denier, a math denier, a mask denier, a COVID-19 denier, and base everything you are on a magical sky, guy in the sky. But then again, your Christian credentials are kind of like going through actually, your Christian, if you're supporting this president, your idea that Christ, to be Christ-like, because in your heart of hearts, that Jesus would not support this guy. Think about it. The porn stars, the lying, the mocking of people. Jesus. Yeah, I mean, no pun intended. But is it possible? Is it possible you think come down and say, oh, well, this is the person. I'm so glad you chose him as your leader. I don't think Jesus would have said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar. He won't say, render unto Trump what is Trump. He would say, fuck Trump. He is not what I am about. It's not about locking kids in cages, separating them from their parents. No matter how you want to dissuade people from coming into the country, being able to do that, and being able to stomach that, and being able to stomach right-wing nationalists, racist, the KKK, the Proud Boys. That is not part of the agenda for Christians or Christ. Christ was not a racist. Christ eschewed racism or what's that? Xenophobia, fear of people on the outside. The Good Samaritan, remember that? Helping people unlike yourself. Not people like you. People different from you. He didn't say, only be kind, look out for yourself. Look out for the wealthy people. Make sure you take care of the job creators. He didn't say that. It's just That's not one of his teachings. So you're one day, if you think he's servicing your goals, he's not. He's using you. He's using your goals. The guy never supported a pro-life agenda. He was pro-choice his whole life. The only reason he does it right now is to curry favor with a group of people that may not desert him. May or may not desert him, because there's plenty of Catholics out there that are not. They're saying there's a whole part to being pro-life. Pro-life is being anti-police brutality, anti-cruelty to immigrants and their families, pro-healthcare, looking out for the weakest and poorest among you. It is not that fuck your feelings kind of attitude. So, maybe hard to balance that, but you're gonna. There was 170 years ago, there was a Hungarian physician, and it was in the midst, right prior to an uprising in Budapest against the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and he worked as an obstetrics physician in Austria, I think, and there was a high incidence of women dying in childbirth. And he came up after long studies. He came up with hand hygiene, and they realized now they didn't make the correlation that what the germ theory did not really come about until the later 1800s. So Lister came about. You heard me mention Lister before, but he knew that if people practice hand hygiene, it greatly reduced the amount of the rates of mortality in women that gave birth. And he was kind of ignored and laughed and scoffed at that at the time. Now it's 170 years later. He ended up dying in a sanitarium because no one believed him and stuff like that. And he was obsessive about it and stuff like that. But he was right in the end. And we have people right now that don't believe in mask, the virulence of this flu. And, I don't think they were, shaking hands, hugging, kissing, all that stuff. That's great. That is great. But remember, you are not promoting anything other than the spread of this disease. I know it's kind of a downer, but sometimes you have to hear the hard stuff. This is Jim the Keys Bartender. I'll be coming to you again. I'll try to do about 3 episodes a week during the election, and I will be there for you. If you have any questions, please send me an email, jimandkeysbartender.com. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're a young woman, at least pretend that you listen to a podcast, and then maybe I'll converse with you and stuff like that. Not that you will gain any money from me, because I will not. I'm on to that stuff. I have never done it. I'm not one of those guys that are in a desperate situation. Thank you very much, and have a great day. And remember, keep your mask on.